Welcome to the Grange podcast, where we strive to rekindle the spirit of community and belonging. Our mission is simple, yet profound: to foster transparent communication and share valuable information that brings us closer together. Join us as we explore stories, insights, and conversations that unite us all. Let's build a stronger, more connected community, one episode at a time. Today, my guest is Spencer Gilmore. Spencer is a husband, father, mechanic, and third-generation farmer on Kelly Hill. During our conversation, we talked about going to school in Orient, early memories of blue-collar work, current male masculinity, and embracing new technology. I could sit and talk with Spencer for hours, and I look forward to having him back on the podcast soon. This is my first podcast, and I'm still learning the ropes of recording, editing, and uploading. My goal is to publish episodes twice a month to YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and Facebook. I will be looking to interview people from all walks of life in the Tri-County area. Also, I look forward to having many small business owners, local elected officials, guests from local federal and state agencies, local law enforcement, and other people or groups that I find interesting. If you or someone you know would like to be on the podcast, please get in touch with thegrangepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in. Now, here's my conversation with Spencer Gilmore. All right, we're live. Welcome.
What's up, dude?
Yeah. This is the Grange Rough Draft 001. Let's bring it back. Grew up on Kelly Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Were you born in Colville?
Yep. Providence.
1988?
89.
89.
Yeah.
That's right.
Halloween.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you're the oldest of two?
I'm the youngest of two.
Your sister's older.
Mm-hmm.
I forget that. Okay.
Yeah.
Youngest of two.
Mm-hmm.
And your sister was a year older than me in school.
Yeah. So she graduated in 05.
Okay, so 2 years. I was
2 years,
07.
Yeah, because I think she was a senior when I was a freshman.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. And then were you Orient?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Orient till the 8th grade.
Okay.
Where Kelly Hill sits, it's like right on the corner of 3. So you have the Northport School District, Orient, and Kettle Falls. So we kind of had to, my parents got to play the roulette game of where we went because the bus would come any direction. And so I went to Orient through kindergarten through 8th grade and then got transferred to Kettle as a freshman. And yeah, my 8th grade class was 8.
Did anyone else come to Kettle with you from that?
Mm-hmm.
Who was in that?
There was Justin Johnson.
Yeah.
Kendall Simonson, Luke Graber. There's 3 others.
Oh, and then Eric Simonson was my class.
Yep, Eric was in your class.
Redheaded kid,
Yep.
right? Yeah. That kid was a math whiz.
So when he graduated high school, he went and joined the military.
Huh.
And he went into military intelligence.
Really?
Yeah, I ran onto his dad. Oh, it'd been probably 3 years after I graduated high school.
Yeah.
And Kendall, who was in my grade, like his dad Dave never really got to see him much, but Eric went into military intelligence, and he would get to come home like once a year, and he'd be there anywhere from like 6 hours at home to 3 days, and he just, like, a truck would pull up and he'd have to load up and leave. Couldn't tell his parents where he was going, what he was doing.
Wow.
Like,
have you seen him in the last 10 years?
nope.
Huh.
Yeah, neither one of them.
Are those kids or that family still around?
I don't know.
Yeah.
The dad used to drive for Orient as a school bus driver, and I feel like I heard through the grapevine he'd retired, but they used to live up Laurier. I don't go up that direction very often to see if their place is still there or anything, so I'm not really sure.
I remember Eric was a really quiet kid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I left after my sophomore year, but I had 2 math classes with him in high school. And that wasn't too long after American Pie had come out. I remember we used to call him the Shermanator.
Yep. He looked just like him too.
He did.
Yeah.
Super nice kid, but was always quiet. And I just remember him being a math whiz in Mr. Bonstrom's algebra class.
Yeah.
So Orient, I mean, 8 kids in your class. Is that one teacher?
Yeah. So one teacher did 2 grades.
Okay.
So it was sectioned first and second, third and fourth, fifth and sixth, and seventh and eighth all had the same teacher, and you were in the same class with all those kids at the same time. So there wasn't really a distinction between those 2 grades together. Like everybody did the same work at the same time. So essentially they would just pile up. The 7th graders and the 8th graders did the same work, and then they would progress it a year. So like your first year, if you're the way they rotated it, like you'd be doing 8th grade work and the next year you'd be doing 7th grade style work. So it was an interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
And it worked for a small school. And it's, I believe Orient's the oldest standing school in Washington State. It was opened in 1910. 2010, they had their 100-year anniversary, and my mom, my sister, and I went up there to it. And I think my wife went up there. Maybe it wasn't the 100-year. I can't remember now. But I think Sydney went with me once, and she got to see the school. They had like an open house thing.
But they've like revamped that school since you were there, right?
I don't know if they had. They hadn't when the last time I was in it.
Okay.
Everything was basically the same. I know when they opened, they didn't have the gymnasium in 1910. That was added.
That was in the basement, right?
Yeah, it was like a split level type of thing.
Yeah.
But they had a huge gymnasium when I was in school there. It was a neat school because the old brick building, colder than sin in the winter. They had boiler heater. The boiler hardly ever worked. So there was a lot of times in the wintertime you'd be in your snow pants and your coat because they would just be like, boiler's not working today. So everybody's doing work in their snowsuit.
Yeah.
And, in the, late spring, early fall, you'd be just hotter than sin, and there's no type of air handler, It was cool. It just had that small time vibe.
Yeah.
And Orient, there's nothing in Orient besides the school, essentially. So, and
Do
a church.
you know where our property is in Orient? So if you come into Orient and right before you cross the bridge, on the right is a driveway, and there's a little manufactured home there, and then 2 acres of yard that we put in.
Okay.
It's just, as soon as you put in at the bridge, it's the first place on the right. And my dad bought that like probably 25 years ago. And then I remember
Is that Tolliver's?
It's right across from Tolliver's.
Okay.
Yeah, just across the road. And I remember we put in, I think Cameron and I worked it just a little bit. We were like 11 or 12, but he put in a full yard on 2 acres. And we did the irrigation and then hydroseeded it. And it's a cool piece of property, but we used to spend summers up there. He bought it and then we were working on it through the summertime. But I remember, we loved going to the people place. We'd go up and get ice cream and soda pop or whatever.
Yep.
But they never locked the school. And so we would go up and play basketball
In the gymnasium.
in the gym. And
Yep.
we had a riot up there. I spent probably 2 summers up there quite a bit. And Robert Tolliver lived across the road, and we used to always bring our paintball guns up. And we had some epic paintball battles up there back in the day. And the Fox boys would come up and Hoover, and we'd camp up there for 3 or 4 days or whatever. And,
Oh, yeah.
but yeah, Orient always has a special place for me. It's
Yeah.
definitely the land time forgot about.
Yeah, for sure. I was really good friends with Justin Johnson.
Yeah.
And we went to Luke Graber and Justin and I and another kid, Brad Parrott. We started kindergarten all together. And the kindergarten was like a little trailer out back behind the school. And we would, the 4 of us, we're always troublemakers, young boys. You can't help it, just causing trouble.
Yeah.
And it's actually, this is kind of funny. So the gal that used to watch over the recesses, her name was Mrs. Dalton, and I can't for the life of me remember her first name. but she lived on what we always called Hippie Hill behind the farm. And so she was like the axe dropper at Orient. Like if somebody was getting in trouble, like she was the lady that'd do it. She was cool. I really liked her more so as an adult, you know, because I understood now because she was dealing with kids with attitudes and, you know, she didn't put up with shit. So fast forward to 2024, Emily's going to Colville, and the teacher she gets is a gal named Jackie Smolden, who was actually my 3rd and 4th grade teacher at Orient.
Relation to Rodney?
I believe so.
Okay.
And so we went to meet her, and it was cool because I haven't seen Jackie Smolden in like, what am I, 35? So let's say 20 plus years, probably the last time I seen her. So we go in there to meet her, and, you know, it was funny because I called her Jackie, you know, because I have a knowing of her. And we come out of Jackie's classroom, and you know, we're saying, you know, it's good to see you and all this stuff. And Jenny Dalton, Mrs. Dalton, steps out of the room right beside Jackie's room. And I looked at her and I go, Mrs. Dalton, you know, and Jackie goes, oh, so she gets Mrs. Dalton and I get Jackie. And I said, well, yeah, but she scares the shit out of me.
Yeah. Did she recognize you?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so Mrs. Dalton at that time was like a teacher's aide in Orient. Well, she went at like 55 or something. She went back in and started going back to school, and she actually got her full-blown teaching.
Oh, wow.
And so she's teaching in the Colville School District, I think 2nd grade, 1st or 2nd grade, which is wild because when I was a kid, like she was a fairly elderly lady to me, you know, at 7 or whatever. And so it's pretty cool to see that my daughter gets one of the same teachers that I got.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah, that's way cool.
So,
Full circle. Mm-hmm. So how big a transition is it then from 8th grade where you're basically, you know, I'm using the word sheltered, but Orient isn't really exposed to the world, right? Mm-hmm. You're living farm life and then small school life. And then you get Kettle Falls, which is still by all standards, small school, but a completely different world, I would have to imagine. What was that, you know, that first couple months of school like?
It was a shell shock, for sure. The plus side, like, so Danny Steigert, which was he was in your grade.
Yep.
Him and I had become really good friends through the fairs. His sister and my sister were in the same class, or were close to each other and I think the same class. But I'd got to know Danny through the Colville Fair because we showed steers and we showed livestock basically from a young age out. And so luckily when I came to Kettle, I knew at least somebody that could kind of guide me through the school system and understand it. Yeah. And then we had teachers that I knew through the FFA program, John Westfeld, Tammy McNamee, you know. But it was definitely shell shock when you go to 8 kids in your graduating class to, I think we graduated, the final number I want to say was like 67 in our class, which I could be wrong on that. But, and I knew everybody, but I didn't know everybody.
Yeah.
Where when you have 8 kids, like you went from kindergarten through 8th grade with almost all those people. And so you knew what they liked. You knew who their parents were, you know, and so then you go to a bigger school with a lot more kids. The other hard part too is there's a lot of the kids in Kettle had went to school together since kindergarten like we had. And so there was already cliques started. And so you kind of had to find your zone. So like I knew Danny, so a lot of times I just hung out with him.
Yeah.
And then the kids that I'd come to Kettle Falls with. So it was interesting. It was definitely a shell shock.
I always thought it was like looking back, you know, I remember new kids coming to school because I'm one of those that started here in preschool and then we're in high school. And then I remember like new kids showing up, but I don't ever remember there being like, from the teachers, this thing of, like we're getting kids from another school, like, you know, be kind to them or, you know, they're here because their school doesn't do secondary, you know, whatever. I also have this weird deal where I think I have like half of a photographic memory. Like I remember very detailed things. My first memory of you is I feel like you wore black Carhartts and a gray T-shirt and wore glasses and kind of had like some curly hair thing going on.
Oh yeah.
And I remember like thinking that's a big dude. Like
Yep.
who is that? But is that accurate? Was that your get up? Yeah.
100%. I wore farm kid, we didn't buck bales, but I wore Carhartts primarily through like probably the 5th grade till I was in college, and just for the longevity, we weren't rich and stuff, and so we had a lot of hand-me-down stuff. And so one of my mom's friends, their son was a couple years older than I was, and so I got a lot of his hand-me-downs, and he wore Carhartts, and so I got lots of them. And I mean, they didn't wear out as fast. I mean, you could damn near get drugged down the road, but those things wouldn't wear a hole in them.
But I feel like at that time frame, hand-me-down Carhartts were way better than new ones.
Oh yeah,
I remember I had a set of new Carhartts, and I feel like Carhartt was pretty fresh on the scene. We're talking 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago. And dude, it took years to get those things. Like I hated my new pair of Carhartts, and I got a set my freshman year, and I wore those the whole rest of the time whenever we were working or doing stuff. And I don't think it was till later that they got like broke in.
Yep.
And then you didn't ever want to get rid of them. But I remember, God, it was a long time. I just felt like Carhartts were great because they wouldn't wear, but they were so uncomfortable to wear.
Yeah. And cold as sin in the winter.
Yeah.
Cold as sin. Like if you weren't wearing long johns in the wintertime, you just had Carhartts on, be prepared to freeze. You might as well not wear pants.
Yep.
Because that's just the way they were.
But I also remember too, I think I was a freshman when my dad had bought Cameron and I our first Carhartt jacket, and it was kind of like a novelty thing, like it was a work jacket. Remember those? They were zip.
Yep.
They were like pretty thick. You'd wear them in the winter, no hood. They were like collared. And I remember when I got that, Cameron and I got matching ones, and like I remember feeling like that, whatever that blue collar thing is, like I have a work jacket.
Yeah.
And at that time I was big into sports and snowmobiling and shit, and so it was kind of cool to have a piece of clothing that you identified of like this is work. And I guess I remember almost wearing that with pride. And then to fast forward, here I am wearing a Carhartt sweatshirt, right? Like
oh yeah.
That's one thing I think about, kind of going down a rabbit hole though. Like obviously there's a bunch of crazy shit going on in the world, and that's like the older I get and the more I understand history, like that's been true since day one. And so a guy can get really spun out on all of that. But then I look at like these smaller things of like, what a cool time to be alive, right? Like for me, I'm a big snowmobiler, and like I look at fuel injection, like how cool is that, And then, I was just thinking the other day too, like with workwear, like I really like Duluth jeans. They have like this gusseted crotch flex thing. That was always my big deal. I never had an ass. And so I always, like, I could blow out the crotch in Carhartts even, and so, or like even working outside and staying warm, like synthetic wool base layers and gloves. And like, we live in such a good time. Like I think back to my grandfather running and I'm essentially doing the same work, but with all of these modern amenities, and even with those, there's still cold days. You still get wet and it still sucks, but it's also like, pretty thankful to have those things. I look even at cordless tools, right? Like how much that has made.
Well, go into your grandpa's toolbox sometime and pull out a ratchet that he used.
Yeah.
And compare it. Like, so my trade is a mechanic, right? I don't do it as much for a career anymore. But I did it for years. That's what I came out of high school and went to college for it. And I have a lot of higher end tools and ratchets. And I'm kind of a prima donna when it comes to ratchets. Like I like a fine tooth, long handle, no grip. I want just a steel handle. I want to feel the cold, feel the heat, right? And when I go and I also farm on the side, so I work on a lot of my own stuff. Well, when I go to the farm and work on stuff, and I go into Dad's toolbox and I pull out a Craftsman ratchet from the 70s, and it's got like 8 teeth, I'm just like, oh, this is awful.
Yeah.
Like this is make or break for me, you know, and I want 80 teeth and I want a short arc swing with a ratchet. But there's also that sense of pride, right? Just like your Carhartt thing. When you pick up an old tool that your dad used, maybe your grandpa used it, and you're working on something, it kind of takes you back to like when men were men, right?
Yeah.
I had a conversation about that with a buddy of mine the other day. You know, there's a term that good times create soft men create hard times, and hard times create hard men, right? So we're in the soft men stage, I feel. And when I look at myself and people that I surround myself with, we're the hardest of the soft men right now. And you look at I don't watch the news. I don't have social media. Like I don't see a lot of these, what do they call them? Like the internet personalities, influencers.
Yeah.
I don't see those types of people. You know, if people send me like a video or something, I see it. Like my wife will show me stuff on the Instagram or Facebook, you know, and I look at those types of men and it's like, man, I feel in my heart that I'm like way harder than they are, but I'm like the hardest part of a soft time of men. Like, what would my grandfather say? I mean, my grandpa Haven, he lived till he was 91, grew up through the Depression. Like, he was a hard man.
Yeah.
But
I also feel that it's relative, you know, and I'm misspeaking because I wasn't there, right? But you didn't have another option, you know?
Yeah.
And like, I would have to believe if we were dealt that same card, you know, you kind of
adapt
you adapt to that, you know? And so I think I can agree with you, you know, as at a 10,000 foot view, something feels off, right? Like the masculine energy feels off, and I can't exactly put my thumb on what that is. But I also believe that it's in us still, like that's in our DNA, you know, and when you study history and look at, you know, the generations that came before us, like pretty resilient, hard people. Yeah. But then it's also it's really fascinating to, you know, dive down the rabbit hole of the Roman Empire and how that I think got soft and then ultimately led to a downfall, you know. So it's interesting to track.
It's that human brain thing. Have you ever heard of the Stanford Project?
Mm-hmm. So, but remind me, I've heard of it, but remind me.
It was a professor at Stanford University wanted to do this test. So he took, I believe it was 12 college males. They flipped a coin. 6 of them were guards, 6 of them were prisoners.
Yep.
And it was during the time, it was in the 60s. It was the peace and love generation, like the hippies, right? And the thought process behind it was a cool use. If you delve deep into it, like it was mishandled and it wasn't a true study. Yeah. But the point of it, if you could truly do an unbiased study, the point of the study was that if you give people authoritarian opportunities, they take advantage of it. That was the thought behind the project. And when you look at it from like 1,000 feet, you're like, oh, that, you know, what happened? You understand it. There's a lot of hands mishandled in it. There's a show on, I want to say it's on Disney, where they delve deep into the Stanford Project. But it's that brain thing when you say, like, if we were put in the same situations, we would do it. You're 100% correct. Like, we've all had to, everybody's walked out 1,000 feet from the pickup and had to do something that they weren't prepared for, and they still did it. Right. Yeah. You use what you have. Going back to the Carhartt thing, you know, I grew up I had an old Carhartt coat. That was my winter coat, right? The FFA took us snowboarding at 49 degrees north once. And all my buddies snowboarded. We didn't do sports like that. So I'm like, yeah, I'll go. You know, I'd seen videos of it. It looked fun. So I got there in a Carhartt coat, which doesn't cinch up the bottom. And my buddy's trying to show me how to do it and all this stuff. So we get to the top of the hill, and I start going down, and I eat shit hard.
Yeah.
And that Carhartt coat turned into a snow shovel and filled all the way up to my neck. I mean, like Frosty the Snowman mold status.
Yeah.
And broke it off and went down the hill. I mean, yeah, it sucked, but you do what you have to do with what you have at hand.
Yeah.
And that's the way our forefathers did it too. And our grandparents did it as well. That statement, they were tougher back then.
Yeah.
Like I look at it on the farming side, right? Open station tractors, small implements. Like I'm doing stuff with what I look at as small equipment, like an 18-foot. I have a 24-foot cultivator, and it seems like it takes forever to do like an 80-acre field. My grandpa did it with a 5-foot.
Yeah.
With a team of horses. You know, and it's, yeah, we all say like they were tougher back then. They didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Like they didn't have the option. Can you imagine my grandfather's eyes in 1950? They were still using horses on Kelly Hill. My dad was born in 51, and he remembers as a child them still ripping fields with a team of horses. So could you imagine my grandfather seeing our 1993 Case 5140 rolling up with a 24-foot cultivator and just blasting through a field? I mean, he'd be like, holy shit, like we're getting 5 times as much work done in a day.
Yeah. Two things there, something I think about our grandfathers, I think both came through, the Depression or maybe born on the tail end of it. And, we always heard, I think from our parents and stuff that like kids these days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and when we were the kids, it was always like an eye roll, like whatever. But now we're at that age where like, it's kind of easy. You can be like, oh my goodness, kids these days.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder, like, when you look back at the time frame, we had the Roaring 20s, right? Which was kind of a rich and prosperous time. I don't know. It'd be interesting to know if that hit these small rural areas. When you hear Roaring 20s, I think of speakeasies and, nice suits and like New York City vibe. I don't know if Roaring 20s hit Stevens County.
Yeah.
But I wonder, the point being, I wonder if our grandparents' parents thought that they were like, oh my God, look at these guys. Mm-hmm. Or if they were like, holy shit, these guys are very resilient. They were dealt a way tougher card than we were, being brought up at the edge of the Industrial Revolution or the beginning of it, I guess. I wonder how they looked at that, or as the Industrial Revolution and now the technological revolution has, grown so much that maybe that whole this younger generation thing, I wonder if that started with our grandfathers. I'd be curious if that went another generation past them.
My assumption is they probably looked at it the same way we do, right? So we use technology every day, right? These cell phones have more computing power than we know what to do with them. Well, our parents, you and I's parents together, I mean, they have been alive since these have became a mainstream thing, but my parents don't know how to use these for anything, and my parents still use a flip phone. They have a house phone. If you want to call them, you call them on the house phone. If they're not there, you leave a voicemail. I mean, how many people have a house phone anymore? I don't have one.
Yeah.
And so I think it's interesting when you look at it to technological advances that come around when you're alive, and it's kind of your responsibility. Do you get into them or you stay away from them? It's like the electronic vehicle thing, electric vehicles. When I look at it, because I come from a background where combustion engines, and I look at it differently than most people do, because I want a big 6-cylinder Cat engine pulling, logs up a hill. But I also try to delve myself into technology with different companies to know that there are different things we can utilize in our system. I'm not going to shy away from it and not learn it, even though it's like, I don't have room for this much more crap in my head.
For sure. Thing. Yeah. It's interesting. Let's go ahead and wrap that here. That gives us 30 minutes. See if See what if I can figure out how to edit it and get it to the world.
Hell yeah.
Mother sat outside the Grange.